Morning. Today I'm going to show you guys how to make the bushing housing for the Onshape master assignment on the vertical shaft support. So back on Onshape, and I'm working on the iPad. I've already made my base. I know I'm making these a little bit out of order. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new part studio by clicking the arrow on the bottom, click on the plus, and a new part studio. You can do the multi-part studios if you want to, and just make them all referenced off of the origin. However, I don't recommend it. I would make a different part studio for each one, just so you don't get confused. So I'm renaming that one the bushing housing. And so if you look, the part is actually fairly simple. It's just a cylinder with a hole in the side and chamfers on the edges. So I'm going to start just by making that cylinder part. So to do that, I'm going to start a new sketch on the front face. I'm going to two-finger click to make it back to normal. And then I'm going to start by making a circle. And I always like to lock my rotation by clicking that orange circle in the corner, just so it doesn't move on me doesn't orbit on me while I'm working. So I'm going to make two circles. They're going to be pretty close in size. Remember, this is it's a hollow cylinder, right? So two rings. Turn off my circle tool, and then I'm going to go dimension. So I need a circle that's 1 inch and 1.25 inches. So next, I'm going to use the dimensioning tool. My first circle is going to be 1.25 inches, and it looks like I'm a little big. So watch what happens when I do this first one. It scaled both of them at the same time. If it didn't do that and the one circle ended up going inside the other, it's okay. It doesn't matter which is which, just as long as one circle is 1.25 inches and the other one is 1 inch. And if you look, we're already fully constrained. So next, we can do our extrude. So clicking up there, extrude. And I always like to look at it from the home view, if we can, or just rotate so we can see a 3D action. And so let's look, how far do we need to extrude this? It doesn't tell us anything on the front view, but if we look at the top, there's that 2-inch dimension that goes the whole length. So we want a new body, and we want a depth that is set to 2 inches. Like that. And then while we're thinking about it, since we have this new part that's created, let's go ahead and rename it. That's called our bushing housing. And let's also go ahead and assign a material to it. So if you remember, the assignment's asking for everything to be made out of steel 1010, so that when we weigh our masses at the end, everything will be the same. Steel 1010. Okay, so next, let's figure out this chamfer thing. It looks complicated, but it's actually very easy. It says chamfer 2x 0.03 by 45 degrees. So first off, remember, chamfer is just a slanted edge that we can put on something. It kind of smooths off the edge, and it also makes for things to mate easier. Remember, we're making an assembly, and bushings will go inside this, and by slanting the edge just a little bit, it makes assembly a lot easier. So the 2x stands for how many times it happens. So there are two chamfers on this, one on the front, one on the back. And if you look close at the part drawing, at the hidden lines there, you can see that there's one on the bottom, one on the top, or front and back. So instead of making the dimension twice, we just make it one time, and then we put a 2x next to it. Think if you were making a Lego on CAD or Onshape or anything, and you were dimensioning all of those different pegs. Instead of dimensioning 8 different pegs, you could dimension one of them and then just put 8x onto it. The 0.03 is its length, and the 45 degrees an angle. So think geometry. A 45, 45, 90 triangle has equal sides, right? So a 0.03 chamfer, because that's the height, how high the chamfer is. Well, 0.03 is also how wide it is. So we could also make it an equidistant chamfer. So to do the chamfers, and this will also apply to fillets on other parts. Remember, we've got some fillets on the vertical shaft here. Oh, I think actually they're all chamfers. Oh, there's a fillet. There it is on the bushing on the outside. So it works exactly the same. Just fillet is a radius instead of an angle, but the 2x and everything else is still identical. So I'm going to click on the features button up at the top. Oh, not an extrude. I'm going to click on chamfer, which is right there. And I'm going to click, you have two options. One, you can click on just the internal cylinder and it'll chamfer both inside edges. But what I'm going to do just to show where we're at is I'm going to click on both edges. So that inside edge and that inside edge right there. I can leave it as equal distance and my distance is 0.03. Now just to show here, it says our chamfer type is equal distance. I could choose distance and angle, but look what it says. Distance 0.03, angle 45 degrees because they're equal distance. I can hit the check mark and I'm done with that step. So if you look, there's just a little lip on the chamfer now, on the bushing housing. All right, so the next step then is going to be making that hole in the top. And so since it's a curved face, if we went to start a sketch, we can't make a sketch on the surface of this curved object. Now that hole goes through both faces, so what we can actually do is we're going to start a sketch on the top face, and then what will happen is we'll extrude it through both directions and just cut the hole out at both times, and so the sketch will be in the middle of it, and that's okay. So I'm going to view normal to sketch plane, lock my rotation, zoom in a little bit. Okay, so my perspective is a little confusing right now, but my origin's on the back right there, and I'm rotated looking down onto it. So like I could rotate my cube. There's my front, but I'm working off of the top. So the hole, remember the width of it overall is 1.25 inches. The width here is 0.625. So the hole is perfectly in the middle, both width and height, right? It's overall 2 inches high, so it's 1 inch wide. So there's a couple different ways that you could do this. Let's do it dimensionally, and then I'll show you geometrically. So I'm going to start by just making a circle, and I'm going to make it off center on purpose. So I'm going to make it right there. Next, I'm going to add a dimension, and I'm going to add just that 1 inch dimension. So from the center of the circle to the origin, this distance, and be careful, you don't want it to be this angled distance. That's not what we're looking for. It's the vertical distance. Should be 1 inch. Now, the next part's a little bit tricky. So what we're going to do is if we can't dimension from like the corner here, because it's a curved piece. There's not really a corner there. So you could project the area of the whole surface. That's messy and you don't need to do that. Another thing you could do is draw a line from there to there and then make that line vertical. But that's what we would have had to do on Fusion 360. But Onshape actually has a nice feature with it. What we can do is we can make 2 points vertical on each other. So I can click on the center of my circle and then the origin, and I got to think if it's either vertical or horizontal here. It is vertical. There it goes. So by clicking vertical, it just pulled that 1 point directly under it. If you get an error message, maybe based on your orientation, it might be horizontal instead of vertical. All right. So the last step then is we still need to give this circle a diameter. That diameter, 0.18 inches. There's my diameter. Circle 0.18, check. Everything's black, everything is constrained. I can leave my sketch, look at it from the isometric view, and if you look, that sketch is inside the object. So now I can extrude, and I want to extrude that little tiny circle, but I can't click it from this view, so I have to rotate slightly so I can see the circle. There it goes. And now instead of add, remember we are removing material because we want it to be a hole. The end type, instead of blind like we've always done, let's do through all because I don't care how long the depth is. I just want it to cut everything away. You can check opposite direction if you want. If you look, it doesn't really make a difference. It's doing one or the other. The trick that we need is a second end position. Once again, instead of blind, we want it to be through all. And then we're done. Check mark. And that hole is through both parts of the bushing housing. So just to show the exact size here, let's go back to isometric so you can check your own work. The bushing housing, if I highlight the part, the weight of this bushing housing is 0.249 pounds.